Welcome to part 3 of the T-section highlighting technique. I have now completed both sides of the technique, as you can see here. I went with 6 foils either side. I felt this was enough foils to distribute the colour evenly throughout the hair for the amount of colour and highlights I actually wanted in. I've also begun to work on the final section, which is our central profile section, and this works horizontally back from the front hairline through to the crown. This T-section highlight pattern is best worn in a centre parting, as it means that you will have the even amount of highlights either side when the hair is parted. For clients that may wear their hair in a side parting, you might want to consider an alternative technique such as a herringbone pattern, which is another fundamental technique we teach here at the Academy. So I'm actually going to continue through. I'm going to place probably around about 6 to 8 foils for this final section. And again, it's just going to give me that lovely, nice, even amount of colour through here. I'm going to work again in the exact same pattern as I did before. I'm just working with nice, even sections, nice and fine, and making sure that they're evenly distributed throughout the hair, just to create a seamless blend of colour. I'm going to work those sections through as shown. I've taken my weave, I've got my foil. I'm going to place it underneath into the fold that I prepared earlier. Lift the hair up, place down onto the section, nice and firm. Press that down nice and tight, a little bit more tension as I actually work through that final section. I'm actually working with a clean brush now. I've actually decided to change brushes, which is why I always have 2 brushes available, because I want to make sure that I am working nice and cleanly through these sections. And again, just paste on around about 1 centimetre to 1 inch away from the root area. I'm going to actually work the colour, the lightness, in this case, all the way through to the mid-lengths and ends. Making sure it's nice, evenly distributed. Again, it goes slightly over the foil, so you just pick it up, flip it back onto itself, and really work that lightener through. I'm going to balayage the root area with the remainder of the lightener, and it's just a soft stroking motion, and that'll just really seamlessly blend that colour into that root area. I'm going to take 1 fold, press that down lightly, a 2nd fold using my tail comb. I want that just lightly, don't scrape too hard. You don't want to disturb the colour underneath. I'm just going to push that back to the root area just to lock it in place, and then make a fold either side, nice and gentle, and you don't want to disturb them as much as possible. I then just work horizontally across. Now, the great thing about working horizontally across a parting is that you do get the evenness of highlights from one side of the parting to the other. If you work straight up towards a parting, it can be quite difficult to match them. So by working front to back or back to front from a channel section or a central profile section, you can create that nice even blend of highlights from one side and to another. I'm just going to take my tail comb into the foil and then press that down, nice and tight tension. Again, I'm just making that extra care to make sure that I am working as cleanly as possible. I've left a small gap there. I'm very confident that I'm not going to overrun the lightener by working too close to the root area, because I've left that gap. I'm just going to work a little bit more lightener through here. Again, use your hand underneath the foil like a board almost like a work surface that you can then paint onto the foil. And then gonna, again, and I'm actually, my brush is actually, I'm holding it quite far down, and that enables me to use it almost like a pen, and I can actually almost draw the lightener onto the strands. Just going to secure that now, exactly the same fashion as before. And again, the backwards lock is not something all hairdressers use, but we do teach this at the Academy because, again, I always like to see it as training wheels for hairdressing, for hair foiling. And then when you're absolutely confident your foils are not going to leak, then you may not need to use the backwards lock. I tend to use the backwards lock maybe when I'm doing tint and lights, so if I'm actually tinting the hair in between. So because this will help me ensure that the two colours don't meet and that we don't get any sort of running of those colours. I always find it's best to prepare your foils to pre-tat and pre-fold, especially in an environment such as an endpoint assessment, for example, or maybe a trade test, because you want to really make sure that you are prepared. But of course for every client, because we want to offer a consistent service throughout to all our clients. Just working this lightener through. And again, I try and keep my hand underneath the foil as flat as I possibly can, because this helps me sort of really evenly distribute that lightener through. And then again, just lightly touch the strands that you've woven into the section, ensuring that you don't go over the edge of the foil. And this will just softly blend that colour in. A little bit of lightening here, just on the edge of my foil. I'm just going to take my glove and just wipe that off. You'll see that I've been wearing PPE, personal protective equipment, throughout, which is in this case gloves and apron. I'm just going to make a fold either side of the section. I'm always making sure that I keep the hair nice and combed. Also throughout the technique, this is really important. If you work nice and cleanly through the sections, you'll end up with a nice, clean, even result. And evenness of weave is key, especially when working on a parting section, because these will be the most visible part of the highlights. So even just that extra 5% of care, just to ensure that the weave is even and consistent throughout, and including the spacing in between each highlight, are definitely key factors in terms of achieving your end goal, your end result. And again, I'm just working the lightener all the way through. I'm working on a flat base here, so that's why I'm working the lightener root to point. But of course, we will need to take into account such factors as previous highlights and previous highlighting, or any colour that may be on the hair. And of course, if you've already got previous highlights in the hair, as said in part 1, we want to weave those sections in so we don't cause over highlighting or over saturation of colour. I'm just going to lift that section up just to make sure it's pressed down firmly, and then fold at either side. A few more foils left in this section now. I'm just going to lower the mannequin slightly. This will just help me in completing the final sections. Always make sure, again, the hair is nice and evenly combed through this section as we work through. And in terms of working on, say, an endpoint assessment, your ways of working and your professionalism is also monitored throughout the service. So ensuring that your trolley is well maintained throughout the service, and it's clean and it's tidy, and that your foils look presentable on the trolley, along with any additional items such as sectioning clips or extra tint brushes. So these are all little considerations that you'll want to make when working as a stylist in a salon, and also when you're being assessed. I'm just working that section all the way through to the mid-lengths and ends. I'm just going to flip that back onto itself now, catch that there, and then this gives me that lovely even surface to work from. Then hold it like a pen, and then just almost imagine like you're an artist painting on a canvas, and you're just lightly feathering the colour into the roots. And now I'm just going to fold once more, lift, secure back at the root area with the lock, and then the final 2 folds at either side. And again, I'm quite delicate in the last final stages of the folding. And I'm just working through the last 2 to 3 sections. The consistency of weave is also key to this technique. So making sure that the actual sections have the same spacing, the same width, and also the same saturation, and the same technique throughout really. That's what really ultimately you're actually looking for. So again, just leaving that small gap there just enables me to ensure that the hair, the lightener won't leak onto the other sections, because we know that's something that all hairdressers, all colourists have to contend with, you know, any leakages on your mesh and highlights. It's happened to us all at one point in our careers, most likely at your sort of stages of development. But I find that this technique, by just balayaging or feathering, to want a foot of a phrase, and then using the backwards lock, really just adds as that safeguard, just to make sure that they're not going to leak. Okay. 2 more sections here. I've got my final section there. I've not used a clip on this stage. I don't feel that's necessary, but please, on your final section, if you want to, use a clip. And usually whilst it's processing, I actually lift the foils back. I don't let them sit over the client's face as though they're doing right now, because that can be uncomfortable for the clients whilst they're trying to relax, you know, whilst it's processing. Maybe they're enjoying a drink or reading a book. So we don't want the foils to be in the way. So I'll just clip them up at the very end. And then just lightly press these foils into place. Final section. Through here, I always leave a gap. So I'll take one section and I'll split. This won't be highlighted. If I highlight this section on top of the back, you'll actually get almost like a band. So I always leave that final section out. It just allows a little bit of the natural colour to still appear through at the crown. It gives that nice soft sort of immersion of colour at the crown. It just makes it look a little bit more natural for that final section. I'm just working towards that root area at this stage and leaving that gap. And then finally, balayage, I'll feather the colour in at the root and fold. So now I will check the sections that I previously highlighted. That will be the back and the sides, and I'll rinse those off when they're ready. So I'll rinse this in 3 sections. I'll rinse the back, then I'll rinse the sides, and then finally I'll rinse the top. I will be working with a toner today, and I'll put a picture on our Instagram, on our social media channels of the finished result. But here is the completed technique for T section of highlights. Just want to pop a clip in there before I do a quick showcase. And I would clip these up and back, so pull them up and back. But for the purposes of the exercise today, I just want to show them in their most natural form. And here is the completed technique for a T section of highlights.